welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on my way to work, but I thought we'd have an interesting little chat about AI and its ability to predict future classic car trends. So in my line of work, we've had the opportunity to play about a little bit with things like ChatGPT to see kind of what students might be using and also to see how we can use it to inform feedback and stuff like that. And I was playing about with it a little bit, and I thought I'd ask it some questions about classic cars and what it thought was kind of important stuff to know about classic cars. And I also played about with asking it about classic car trends and stuff. And one topic that I think is always up for hot debate is what's going to make a really good future classic. Lots of people like to think that they're good at predicting them. Other people kind of say that it's completely unpredictable what's going to be a popular classic car in future. Because whilst you can look into things that have made classic cars popular in the past, you can't always predict what that last ingredient, that magic thing that is what eventually gets people really into the classic car that they buy, and it's totally unpredictable. But I thought, let's see how good AI's understanding of the classic car world is and what it thinks a future classic would be, and compare that to how a Morris Minor would have been described in period. So it came up with a list of features, presumably drawn from all the many articles that are written about what makes a good future classic, compiled it all together, and then I'm going to kind of test it against what a Morris Minor might have felt like in period, what people might have thought about a Morris Minor in period, to see whether the AI's list can accurately predict 75 years later how popular a Morris Minor is. So first up was an iconic design. And this is kind of a bit, could go either way with a Morris Minor. Obviously, we now know what an iconic designer Alec Izagonis was. We know how revered the Morris Minor design and the Mini design that came after are, and kind of what a huge highlight of his career those designs were. But if we look in period, whilst they are hugely different to anything Morris themselves had produced before this point, we can, and I'm sure a lot of us have had this, look at other similar cars that were being produced in a kind of similar design, similar shape in the period by other manufacturers. I can't be the only Morris Minor owner who someone's confused their car for a VW Beetle. And I'm sure you can think of lots of other cars that were being made by other manufacturers that kind of fitted this similar jelly mold shape that was becoming popular. But there are a few quirks of the Morris Minor shape that I think have led it to be as popular as it is. The big grille at the front, making it quite a happy looking face, I think appeals, and the versatility of kind of having 2 doors and 4 door options, the convertibles, having kind of something that appeals to everyone in a variety of different shapes, definitely seems to have aided the longevity of a Morris Minor. The next on the list was a limited production run, and this is something that the Morris Minor definitely fails at. The Morris Minor was produced for over 20 years, and whilst there are some tweaks and differences, so some versions are rarer than others, the large majority of people would agree that a Morris Minor was not in what we would call a limited production run. But yet I think that works in its favour. We'll come on to talking about how popular they were in period, how everybody knows someone who owned one, and so actually not having a limited production run, I think, adds to the appeal of the Morris Minor today. Obviously, whilst talking about limited production runs, we do have to mention the Minor Million, and that in itself does have a huge amount of appeal. But in terms of people realising the value of them as future classics, I don't think it was as kind of considered. We know how little thought went into the colour choice, arguably, and the tweaks and changes that they made to that short run of vehicles, and people still have found ones that were in complete state of disrepair and have had to kind of completely restore them, which suggests that it wasn't like anybody who had one was completely revering it as something that was an investment for the future. It was just kind of a bit of a limited edition colourway, in the same way that you might get a car these days that for 6 months of the year is available in a certain colourway, and that's it. And so you can't argue necessarily that there was as much knowledge about what would be popular about the Minor Million in the future and how revered they are now, necessarily in the period. So like I said, whilst they don't have the limited production run, they do have the community interest, which is the next part on the list. And community interest, I think, is where the Morris Minor excels. Having grown up around lots of classics, there's kind of two reactions I think you get to having a classic car at a petrol pump or in a car park or driving down the road and parking up on the street or whatever. There is the, oh, so-and-so I know had one of those, or, oh, I grew up going to school in one of those. And the Morris Minor really gets that. The other one is that, oh, what's one of those? I've never seen one of those before. But by hitting that first demographic, it means that people have that nostalgia hit, where it then makes them perhaps consider wanting to own one. It's not personally why I got one, but I know a lot of people who have got one because grandma had one or whatever, and that is definitely an area where the Morris Minor excels in kind of this list of predictability. Now, performance and innovation is next on the list, and I think we can all agree, despite some young members' best efforts to eke out 1 or 2 extra horsepower by making slight changes to their Morris Minor, they are not the most high performance vehicles you could purchase for the money. They have oodles and oodles of character, and that works massively in their favour, but they were not designed to go fast and go quickly. They were designed to kind of get the family there in good time. But they do have the fact that they sit pretty reasonably in modern traffic in their favour. They are happy to kind of motorway cruise if you're comfortable with that, happy on a dual carriageway. You can get them quite happily to 60 odd miles an hour when they're standard, if they're kind of well looked after. And that obviously is a huge benefit in the fact that you can kind of use them more easily and more regularly. You don't have to have had unexpected experience with double declutching and things like that. So the fact that there's kind of synchromesh on some of the gears in a standard gearbox works a little bit in their favour than stuff that would have come a little bit before that. I also have to note that in terms of innovation, the rack and pinion steering is really good. And when Peggy had some work done on hers over the summer, and it's kind of been refreshed a bit, I found that her steering is much more accurate and much more enjoyable than kind of power steering that you might find on a modern car. And I can quite easily manoeuvre her and park her, and just it's such a joy to drive when you've got well looked after and well greased steering on a car, that really defeats what a lot of people think is a drawback of classic driving. It isn't heavy steering, it isn't tricky to manoeuvre, and so it appeals perhaps to a wider audience as a result of that, or gets people hooked at least on classic ownership. The next category is cultural impact, and this talks about kind of cars being well remembered for being in movies or TV shows, and I think I could probably do a whole separate podcast on all of the movies, music videos, song lyrics, books, all of the things that have featured a Morris Minor. It's kind of a very quintessentially British vehicle, and so when somebody's, I guess, casting something like that, of a period or even out of period like the Borrowers, it fits really well, and it kind of conveys a symbol in that regard, and I think it works really well in that. And again, that I think is linked to its community interest and how many people recognise them because of how plentiful they were. So definitely a win for the Morris Minor in that section. And the next section, provenance and celebrity ownership, also seems to be a pretty good win for the Morris Minor. Again, another huge list of people. I think you could probably name endless people, and a lot of people own Morris Minors now that were owned by famous people in period, and again adds to that appeal. But I don't think, again, it's necessarily a reason why you would buy a Morris Minor. You wouldn't necessarily see a celebrity with a Morris Minor and think, oh, that's definitely what I want, in the same regard that you might see I don't know, a character from Fast and Furious having a car and being like, oh yeah, that's really cool, I want one. The appeal much more comes from the everyman, I think, with Morris Minors. So whilst it's relevant, I don't think it's necessarily what's contributed to their status as a classic vehicle. Same can be said really for historical significance and motorsport achievements. Whilst Morris Minors did rally, did take part in motorsport, and also continue to be used in things like Goodwood Revival, it's not what appeals. People are much more likely, again, to remember Aunt Sue's neighbour who had one than they are to remember the Monte Carlo car that was driven by 3 women in 1949. That's a car I remember and am hugely invested in, but it's not necessarily what is going to be the reason. You're not buying this car because it's a car that won hundreds and hundreds of prestigious rally awards and is known for that. You're buying it because, I guess, of its friendly face and because of its place on Britain's roads for so long. The next section is limited editions and special models, and again we can mention the Minor Million here, and again the appeal of those is huge, and they do fetch higher value than you'd think for a Morris Minor. And then there's people who also seek out to create replicas of them because of the appeal that they hold. And those Minor Millions are also relevant in the next category when we talk about condition and rarity. Whilst the majority of Morris Minors are not what you would consider rare, a car that only ever had 351, I think, versions made originally definitely has an appeal. But I think within this category we could also place things like Morris Minor vans and pickups, because of their commercial use in period. They were workhorses. We all know how they weren't necessarily cared for, and they required to be worked extra hard, and so weren't necessarily looked after. And that then led to them being very low in their numbers of survival, which now means a well cared for or well restored version of a van or a pickup commands much higher prices. And whilst that, I guess, does contribute to their desirability, it's not exclusive to a Morris Minor. Commercials of all classics are rarer than, I guess, their saloon counterparts or their family car counterparts, and therefore I don't think this is a category where we can really say the Morris Minor wins, because it's just something that all classic cars really experience. Next, we've got brand reputation, and this is a bit of a mixed bag. I'd say at the time when the Morris Minor came out, brand reputation for Morris was quite good, was quite favourable. They were kind of becoming part of BMC towards the middle of the run, which again kind of aided their brand representation, and people were pretty kind of on board with it. And their pre-war stuff was popular as well, so people had carried on a long ownership of various Morris vehicles over the years. However, towards the end of Morris's existence, you could argue that things had started to go down for some reputation because of kind of quality issues with some of the cars towards the end of the run. But that's not exclusive to Morris. It's not. It's kind of across the board with a lot of British manufacturers at the time that slowly kind of started to fade out because of issues with quality of production and things. So the brand reputation is varied, but it's not unique to Morris. It's not a case of people would be hugely invested in them because of prestige or quality, but they might be hugely invested in them because their family had brand loyalty back in the day and were always buying Morris cars. They replaced a Morris Minor with another Morris Minor when the family car was going to be upgraded or whatever, because they ran for so long. And so that might be a way in which I guess brand reputation influences people's purchases today. Manual transmission is an interesting inclusion in this list, and I think it's somewhat Americanized. If you think about it, a lot of British classics were, and almost having an automatic option is rarer. But I think it might actually flip and become slightly more problematic. I know that there's a rise in people doing automatic tests when they are doing their driving test for the first time at the moment, which then dramatically limits the amount of historic cars that they can legally drive on the roads. Things where you get the opportunity to drive on private roads and try out a manual in a classic might help people turn their heads to going and doing a manual test. But it's interesting that it made the list. I think that's definitely quite an American inclusion. But for clarity, all Morris Minors came with a manual transmission, and so I guess it ticks that box, but it seems like a weird inclusion to me. The offer of alternative powertrains, for example, having hybrid or a very early version of electric, is something that the AI predicts might in future contribute to a car being viewed as a future classic, which is quite interesting. And if you look at kind of some of the broader museums, for example, the Lauman Museum, it includes displays of early electric and steam powered and wood burner powered cars. So there's definitely an intrigue in these alternative powertrains historically. A Morris Minor itself has a pretty standard powertrain. It's an internal combustion engine, but if you want to think about kind of modifying classics, they do have an appeal because of the huge engine bay that they offer, which, if you've got the standard powertrain in, works great for being able to work in and around the engine with relative ease, but also allows you to make some pretty interesting modifications and be able to fit quite a lot of different options within the bonnet area if you are inclined to do so. The final thing on this list is timeless appeal, and this is where it's kind of going to appeal to various generations and interest lots of people for a long time. And I think in my experience the Morris Minor really ticks this box. I have had as many smiles and waves from children on their way to school as I have from older people when I've been driving through the local town or whatever. It really brings out a smile, but I think a lot of classic cars do. I think people like seeing them out, especially at this time of year. I got really excited when I saw like a 1990s Merc out yesterday on my way to work. So they just raise a smile, whatever. But is that appeal enough to convince somebody to drive one and own one? Perhaps not. But we can hope that perhaps seeing them out and about and seeing how usable they are might help convince more people that they are a viable and interesting option, and perhaps also a greener option than producing lots of new cars that we don't necessarily need. So, overall, how do we think a Morris Minor did? I think it ticked quite a few boxes that were available in predicting what a future classic might be, but equally, I think some of those boxes were kind of more coincidence rather than design. I think it's a fantastic thing that Morris Minors have survived in the quantity and appeal that they have to this day, and for so many of them to have reached the 75th anniversary last year is a fantastic thing, and I'm hoping that Peggy will see herself to 75 years of existence as well. I'd be interested to see what you think on today's roads matches the criteria that the AI came up with, and see what your predictions are for future classics from this list. So let me know down in the comments on YouTube or on the comments on the post on social media if you listen through other podcasting apps. In the meantime, thank you ever so much for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.